Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to cover some Easter eggs and things you may have missed in episode 3 of Moon Knight. So, let's break it down. Right off the bat, we find out that Stephen actually only lived 20 minutes away from Layla, which I was actually a little surprised by that. I thought maybe he moved to London or wherever exactly he is to kind of get away from her and keep her safe, but turns out they really don't live that far away from one another. We also find out that she is basically a black market Robin Hood. So she's already been in somewhat of a heroic gig right off the bat, which is something that both her and Mark would have in common. And when we do get to jump over to Mark this episode, we get these frequent blackouts on his end, just to kind of see him get a taste of his own medicine when it comes to taking over Steven randomly. But with that said, we also do get a third personality tease, which may even be the biggest part of this episode because for me, I had just accepted that, maybe this season was just going to be two personas, and maybe one of the main things for the next season would be, a third one, either Jake Lockley or whoever else they might want to name. I mean, for example, the security guard keeps calling Steven Scotty, which he may not care about him and that's why, or maybe he actually knows him as Scotty, because like I keep saying, it's really weird that no one noticed any accent changes, or when he asked the tour guide out, it doesn't seem like Mark really wants a relationship because of Khonshu. It just seems like maybe this third personality that was just teased has actually been here for quite a while. Or, when it first happens, Mark gets his head hit pretty hard. He falls back and just plummets onto the ground. And so, if this third personality hasn't been around this long, it could have potentially either created it with how hard that fall was, or may have unlocked it, since it seems like further down the episode, Mark says he's dealt with Steven for quite a while, so maybe he's just been suppressing all of these personalities for as long as he remembers. And if this new identity is Jake from the comics, aka Jake Lockley, he isn't evil in the comics, but they may be trying to create some more, say, inner turmoil by having a personality that is more off the rails. Because we've already seen the dynamic that Steven and Mark had and how they kind of butt heads. I mean, imagine having one that is just completely derailed in your own head and trying to keep him at bay when you really can't do anything to stop him. You can't punch your way out of this issue. So I think that would be pretty interesting to see. And talking about this has got to be one of the darkest things we've seen in the MCU, right? And I'm all here for it. They've handled this show so well so far. I think the humor is very well balanced, so we can still have these really serious moments and pretty gruesome fight scenes. When we see the realization that there is another persona, we see it in a bloody knife reflection. Further along in the episode, we do finally get to see the Ennead, which has been teased ever since episode 1. And during this whole scene, we find out a few more things about Khonshu that we didn't know before. Potentially he has this relationship with this other god, or he did at one point, which is why she decides to help them. And he was overall banished for basically cherishing humanity more than the others did. Once they felt like humanity kind of turned their backs on them and stopped worshipping them, they really just decided to leave, while Khonshu still actually has this decent side to him and wants to preserve this realm. And I've got to add, I'm pretty sure we were all impressed by Oscar Isaac's performance when he is acting like Khonshu is speaking out of him. This also explains why the gods have been gone throughout the entire MCU history. A common question throughout the MCU is, where are all these other beings? Why aren't these heroes here helping? Where are these gods at? And so this kind of explains that they were actually in what's known as the Overvoid this entire time, just keeping their distance from humanity because they really don't care anymore, which is crazy because at the end of the episode, Khonshu goes to such extreme measures that he's willing to sacrifice himself and be put away for who knows how long just for humanity, while these other gods don't even bother with helping them out anymore. They're just observing. Like, they watched Thanos snap half the universe and did absolutely nothing. And then on over to where Layla and Mark are trying to find their way to Amit's tomb. Layla is wearing this crescent-shaped, necklace piece that is actually a weapon, which totally fits her character, considering she does not want to stay out of the action. She wants in it just as much as Mark does. Proves that she can actually hold her own. And talking about proving their own, Stephen really proves that he can work well when it comes to this Egyptian knowledge. Him and Mark work together so well, like they do end up finding the map. So this really shows where Stephen's worth is and how Mark is learning that he can't do everything. Stephen is his own person and has his own strengths and weaknesses. Same thing with Stephen and Mark. Stephen absolutely hates any kind of fighting. But when we get to this hilarious scene of Stephen trying to stop the fighting, he immediately, within 5 seconds, is just, inches away from death, because the fighting, of course, is not going to stop. And so Mark has to come back out and really take control of things. And so their dynamic is just constantly improving as these episodes go along. And then after the fight, we see Mark get into this white hoodie, which is obviously representing his uniform. And we also get teases to this underlying story that we haven't really talked about much yet. But Layla's father was murdered, potentially, by Mark or maybe even this third personality. And that's why, when asked about it, he seems really kind of hesitant and reluctant to say anything about it. So probably by the end of the season, we may see a huge breakup, or at least just a big problem between the two, because he's not telling her the full truth, and he hardly ever does. And going back to the Ennead, their meeting was in the Pyramid of Giza, which, like I theorized, was foreshadowed in the very first episode by the little girl that Stephen talks to. They go on about how this little model of the Pyramid of Giza, probably doesn't have anything in it, which, as we come to find out, is actually home of all of the gods, and when they come to meet and talk about these worldly issues. Similarly, I did not catch a QR code this episode. I haven't seen if anyone did, but the website was updated and gives you a new issue to read. And then we get a Madripoor reference when they are trying to find this way to Amit's tomb. Last time we heard about that was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Since the show is taking place in a similar time period, we're getting a few more references to that show. We gotta talk about just how amazing that character switch was from Oscar Isaac, from Mark to Stephen. Without missing a beat, you can actually see the transition from one character to another, and then the accent change is just so spot on. It explains immediately why they chose this man for this role. And this leads Stephen's character into a absolute beautiful constellation scene as they try to find the correct date. And this also gives Stephen a chance to kind of grow into his abilities and show that he can still be helpful with these superhuman abilities, even if he isn't one for violence. There are multiple uses for these new powers that he's gotten. And then one more thing that I didn't mention earlier in this video is that Anton is actually known as Midnight Man from the comics. I believe that they did have further plans for this character, but considering that the actor did sadly just pass away, really can't see them pursuing this character anymore unless they put it behind a whole different name. But that's just everything I spotted in episode 3 of Moon Knight. If I missed anything, let me know down in the comments below, because I would love to hear it. And also tell me what you thought about this episode. I truly believe the series has not missed an episode yet. It's just continuously getting better and better, and I'm going to hate when it ends. And that's that. See ya.